I'm Tony Strongman at the Rank Amateur Icon. Thank you for selecting this video on relationships. Before I continue, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. If you haven't activated the notification bell feature on this channel yet, do it now. You may even now give this video a thumb up. That'll allow you to go ahead and forget about it later, which you might have done otherwise all by yourself. Comment courteously below. Okay. Relationships. All right, I have something specific in mind here, and I'll tell you what it is right now, but then I'll tell you a funny thing before really getting started here. I'm currently narrating and uploading the book, The Master Key by L.W. Reliance, and it just occurred to me just now that there are a lot of places in here as I'm narrating, and as I've read through it before, and sometimes very closely at points in my life, notice that there are words, terms, and ideas that occur almost like very close to each other in the text, and that these terms, concepts, what have you, have relationships with one another that, well, there's a multiplicity of them, in each case, but they're not really brought forth here in the text, but they are there. And if you think even further into these relationships among these things in any specific case, you'll find even further relationships among these things. And they can be very helpful to your understanding of many affairs, especially those having to do with mastery of self by self, mental discipline, concentration, personal evolvement, establishment of true selfhood, knowledge, mental clarity, and the like. So, relationships. Mentally examining the relationships among things is it's a pillar. It's one of the relations, okay, are one of that thing in itself, the relations among things, form one of the pillars of creative thinking. I wanted to make that clear here, because in discovering for oneself relationships, by examining relationships, coming upon more relationships among same things, like the terms and their meanings. In this book here that I'm going to use as an example, it's a matter of creative thinking for yourself. Okay? So I used to have a list of the kinds of relationships that most closely build into creative thinking when they're considered, closely examined. They lead to new ideas. But I lost that list. So then I was thinking of them for myself, and I wrote down. Well, I'll tell you what I wrote down. But I thought I would get the help of the internet. So I looked up relationships, just kinds of relationships, and I hit return. The standard Bing or Google search type of thing. I came up with, this is funny, this is exactly what I expected, but, I was hoping for something different. Types of relationships: family, friendship, acquaintance, romantic, sexual, work, situational. Can also be based on the number and gender of partners, such as monogamy, polygamy. Aspects of relationships such as affection, communication, sexual intimacy, finance, household, leisure, family. Scrolling down, the 6 types of relationships and their effect on your life: family, friend, acquaintance, romantic, sexual, work, situational. Once again, what are the different types of relationships? 35 terms to know. Find out the meanings and examples of terms such as asexual, images of kinds of relationships, and they show different people in different situations with respect to one another. What are the different types of relationships? Psychom. Learn about the different ways people interact with and need each other, from platonic to polyamorous. And on it goes. Well, here's what I had in mind. I ended up writing them down for myself. Temporal relationships, those having to do with time, like what comes before what follows what, or a thing now and then that same thing later, and what their likenesses and differences are. Spatial relationships, what's in front of what, what's behind what, what's next to what, what's to the left. All right. Causal relationships. What's the cause and what's the effect among two things? Which is which? Or does it work both ways? What brings about what? If you have something here now, and now it's going to be a cause, what would be the effect? Conceptual relationships. What concept relates to what other? Or brings up one other? We'll be working with that a lot. Logical relationships. Semantic relationships. What things mean. Teleological relationships. What are things' purposes? What's the purpose of this as opposed to the purpose of that? What's the reason for it? What's its purpose? What's it used for? Numerical relationships. Is something of greater quantity than something else? Why? Okay. Those are the kinds of relationships I think those fit into a category. I'm not sure what to call it. Whereas these others that popped up, those all belong to their category too. Like, well, are you guys having sex yet? Yeah, that's what they come down to, isn't it? Some of them. Or quite often, back in the recesses of the mind, when talking about these other outward appearances of relationships among people. So are you guys doing it? Nah. Well, all right. Those are the kinds of relationships we're talking about. And these different things can be combined, of course, but this is not about creative thinking. I just wanted to bring this up because creative thinking seems to be in great demand. But then one must be careful how one exercises it. A good idea to become familiar with the building blocks of creative thinking, wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you say? Well, one of them is examining things' relationships with other things and with themselves, perhaps through time. Here are different ways to think of temporal relationships, as a matter of fact. You can think of something coming before or after something else, but you can also think of, as I was implying earlier, something now and then something, that same thing later. For example, you can look at an object, this flip phone, this piece of paper, anything you like, and bearing the same thing in mind, this phone, this piece of paper, what came before, it came before it now. Like retrace it back in your mind, like a movie. or in still shots in increments, all the way back to when this the large portion of this material was part of a tree, and forward in time until it's gone, until it doesn't look like that at all anymore. It has disintegrated. How it became integrated and then disintegrated. That's a temporal relationship is with the same thing, just running it through time. Well, okay, let's get to work here with our first thing here. Look, I'm just going to pick lesson 6 in the book and go through it the next couple of videos, find some concepts, terms, phrases, and their meanings, which become conceptual whenever we start to compare them with one another and find their relationships with one another. Right here in the first paragraph of lesson 6, chapter 7, page 43, it says, it's more than this. It's wise and will appeal strongly to the earnest student because it will develop great, and now these 3 are italicized, self-reliance, poise, and feeling of power. Self-reliance, poise, and power. Now, is there a specific reason why those 3 are put here together like that? Well, yeah, sure. If we look at the greater context in which they appear, that might become apparent. But what can we just get out of this? Why are they together? Let's just examine that out of context and take a look at it. Might we find relationships among self-reliance, poise, and power? Feeling of power. What might they have to do with one another? Really? What can we draw on that we may already know about those 3 individually? And now see how they might work together. Maybe it be 3 different aspects of the same thing. Maybe bounce off one another, helping each helping the other to become more of what it is. Is there a causal relationship among these? Poise. Let's take the one in the middle as a starting point. Self-reliance, poise, and a feeling of power. Poise. What is it? Well, we could do a Google search for that too, and probably not come up with what we're looking for here exactly. Poise. We might think of somebody standing with good posture, not wavering, unwavering, good posture. Poise. You may think of a ballet dancer, poised on one toe. Poise. All right. Well, let me ask you this, right off the bat, now that I've thought of the ballet dancer poised on 1 or 2 toes, the point toe thing. I guess it's all the toes. I'm not sure. But it's one-pointed standing, I'll tell you that. Do you think maybe that the ballet dancer, the ballerina or the ballerino, might have a feeling of power at that moment, or during those moments of that poised thusly? Yeah, I think so. And what about self-reliance? Starting to get a feeling for how these things might relate to one another. Right there, right? Well, poise. Okay. All right. Think of the pendulum swing. The pendulum swing. The big pendulum swing among things. Think of the law of opposites, first of all, and the principle of polarity inherent therein. Okay, so we have emotional unrest over here. Over here, this goes on forever. It's just a line. And one pole is total unrest emotionally. The other one is total emotional steadiness. Neutrality. Right. And between there somewhere, there's balance, point of balance. Now, usually what goes on is there's a movement back and forth. We're not always at the point of balance. We might never be at the point of balance. But there is always a point at which there can be the greatest poise in any such arrangement, where there's the law of balance, and the principle of opposites, or principle of polarity. I mean, the law of opposites, and its inherent principle of polarity. There's always a point of balance, and that is the point at which there is the greatest poise. Especially if it's a human attribute that we're talking about, a human character disposition. That's what we're getting at here, right? All right, that's our general subject. Poise. The point at which poise, where's the greatest potential for poise, is at the point of balance. Now, that is the point from which there's the greatest potential also for transmuting this entire state here, with its opposites, to a higher level of itself for us, within us. Now, saying more about that is not the point of this video. I wanted to point out where poise is. That is also the point at which there is the least disturbance going on. There's not a lot of going back and forth. We do arrive, we have the point of balance, and we're poised on it. We're just staying right there. Just like the ballerina is poised upon a point of balance and staying right there. The feeling of power there, either for the ballerina or for us in any other area of endeavor, the feeling of power is at its greatest. It has the greatest potential for us, the feeling of it, because there is power in that. That is where we have the power to transcend into a higher level of whatever this is. That the whole thing could be labeled like ballet tiptoed standing. Is when that dancer arrives at position of poise upon the point of balance, that the entire idea of poise upon a point of balance in the art of ballet can be taken to a higher level. There must be stillness, and there is stillness in poise. Self-reliance? Sure. So there, we got a little bit more out of develop great self-reliance, poise, and feeling of power than just that phrase now. We looked at some, relationships among the three, how they help to bring on one another, make each other greater. I mean, sure, that feeling of power is going to feed back on the ease of poise and the manifestation of self-reliance, and so forth. On it goes. You think more about it. You consider it further. Allow your mind to be creative in this direction. Okay? You'll get a lot out of it. It's not as hard as you may think. Or, well, if you think it's easy, it might be harder than you think. Well then, did you like the video? Give it a thumb up. We'll do more of these. Same chapter, just use the same lesson. Just go through it. There are plenty of them. Okay. Like the video, thumb up. Even if you didn't, subscribe, get notified, comment courteously. Thanks for selecting this video on relationships. I'm Turk Strawman at the Ranki Ramacharaka. Go forth and multiply your capacities for mastery of self by self, personal evolvement, and the establishment of true selfhood.